think the devil drags you into hell anymore? I think he invites you to a content house in Los Angeles and promises you'll go viral. That's my version of hell, anyway. In another era, prophets preached from pulpits. Now they live stream, ring lights instead of halos, brand deals instead of blessings, and salvation measured not in souls saved, but followers gained. It began with dancers, beautiful, disciplined, hungry for greatness, and a pastor who said God had chosen them, a shepherd who spoke in scripture and sponsorships, weaving obedience into purpose and devotion into profit. Their days were filled with worship and rehearsal, their nights with prayer and content planning. And somewhere between the sermon and the algorithm, their independence disappeared, not in violence, but in applause. For outsiders, it looked like influence. For insiders, it felt like a calling. But for families locked outside, standing against large doors and blocked message threads, it was something else entirely. A cult disguised as a management company, a church disguised as a brand, and a leader disguised as a savior. Their faith was weaponized by the promise of fame. But filters can only hide so much, believe me. And when dancers stopped calling home, when family visits were spiritual distractions, when every dollar, every hour, every breath flowed upward toward one man, the truth leaked into the world. And the world did what it does best. It watched, it shared, it speculated, it documented the downfall in real time until law enforcement finally showed up to the house everyone thought was glamorous and found something much darker behind those ring lights. This isn't just a story about influence. It's a story about worship and control, about the kind of power that doesn't need chains, only loyalty, fear, and a #blessed caption. Today we are talking about the 7M cult, dancing for the devil. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. Los Angeles loves to call itself the City of Stars, but that's just a polite way of saying it's a cathedral built by human longing, a place where ambition kneels at its own altar every morning and whispers, "Make me chosen." The neon answers back, "We will, if you give enough of yourself away." When Miranda and Melanie Wilking left Michigan, they weren't running toward fame. They were stepping toward what they thought was possibility, toward the warm hum of recognition that felt like applause. These were girls who once measured life in 8 counts and inside jokes, who flipped hair in sync and spun like the world was dizzy with them, who danced not for strangers, but for the simple joy of being alive inside the music. These girls didn't arrive hardened, they arrived hopeful, and hope in Los Angeles is always hunted. Their earliest videos didn't sparkle with the performative gloss of influencer culture. They breathed. Living room choreography, mismatched socks, giggles between takes, breaths taken without rehearsing how they would sound. The TikTok audience didn't follow them because they were polished. It followed because they were pure. Refreshingly unguarded, bright in a way that wasn't artificial. These girls reminded the world what authenticity looked like before filters learned to wear sincerity as a mask. And yet, in the shadows of every dream lies someone waiting to turn belief into leverage. The sisters found their way to Shekinah Church, a place that didn't announce itself as a trap. Why would it? Traps never do. Real traps feel like belonging before they feel like bars. The church glowed with the promises of purpose, whispered about divine calling, as if heaven had a VIP list and the sisters were already on it. Worship nights brimmed with tears and trembling hands raised like antennas, eager for meaning to descend. And then came 7M Films, the so-called management arm, hovering like a guardian angel with contracts hidden beneath its wings. a hybrid of ministry and media, piety and profit, sanctity and sponsorship. In that soft light between praise and production, Pastor Robert Shin stepped forward, not imposing, not forceful, but warm, with that disarming calm that men in control have mastered through centuries of spiritual theater. He spoke destiny like a love language. Robert held authority like a gift only the obedient were wise enough to receive. He didn't say, "Give me your autonomy." He said, "Let me protect your talent and your calling." He didn't say, "Silence your doubt." He said, "Doubt is the enemy attacking your purpose." He didn't say, "I own you." He whispered, "God entrusted you to me." Oh, so sinister. When someone tells you your life has divine purpose, you listen. When someone tells you your talent is heaven's signature, you believe. And when someone wraps control in scripture, obedience doesn't feel like surrender. It feels like faith. Slowly, subtly, Miranda's world narrowed, not because she was weak, but because she was faithful. Faith is the tenderest doorway through which control slips quietly. Faith, in its most vulnerable form, trusts, and she trusted. Miranda trusted the pastor, trusted the system, trusted that destiny sometimes sounds like someone else's voice when God speaks through them. Melanie watched the shift, the way a person watches a loved one drift into a dream they mistake for awakening. Calls got shorter, plans got postponed, check-ins began feeling monitored, and advice turned into directives. Robert Shin's guidance became governance. And the sacred emotional thread between sisters, a bond that once felt indestructible, began thinning, stretched across distance, doctrine, and duty. Miranda wasn't chained, she was cherished into captivity, loved into obedience, and praised into silence. The most insidious prison is the one that convinces you it's a sanctuary, you know? If you asked her whether she felt manipulated, she would have smiled, serene and unwavering, and told you that no, she was chosen. She would have praised discipline as devotion and the supervision as safety. Domination doesn't roar in places like these. It whispers, tender and holy, until you forget you ever desired to stand alone. And here's the truth that most people don't understand until they've lost someone to a cult-like belief system. You don't watch a person vanish all at once. You watch them fade. Not into darkness that would be easy to name. They fade into righteousness, into certainty, into the luminous glow of someone convinced they have finally found the voice of God, only to realize too late it sounded eerily like a man who wanted power disguised as praise. Miranda didn't fall, she followed. Weakness that felt like devotion and foolishness that felt like faith. And faith, when weaponized, it does not break bones, it breaks identity, piece by piece, until the person who remains looks whole, but belongs to someone else. Los Angeles never kidnapped her. It merely introduced her to a shepherd who learned how to brand sheep while calling it salvation. And in those early days, no one saw the danger that these sisters were in. They saw glory and purpose. They saw young women rising. No one realized they were also disappearing. Inside Shekinah and 7M, obedience was not demanded, it was celebrated. It was framed as maturity and faithfulness, as spiritual refinement in a world that worships distraction. These girls joined this church and were told that they were being guided and instructed, that they were talented, and that they needed someone to watch over them in this evil city of Los Angeles. Their mornings came early, not because anyone imposed them, but because their early devotion would sharpen the spirit. That's what they were told. Prayer didn't feel like obligation. It felt like life until the day it became routine, and routine became requirement. When you're told that God is most present while you're being disciplined, you begin to fear rest. When you're praised for being consistent, you become terrified of pausing. It's that psychological machine of who can suffer the most, you know? Soon the days at the church were filled with prayer, making content, worship, check-ins, rehearsals. It wasn't a schedule, but more of a rhythm, not a command, but a calling. We often think that captivity means chains, but to people inside a cult or a high-demand system, it becomes a place where you don't have to think. They began journaling, and the journaling was supposed to be holy. They were told, write your struggles down. Let God see the things that you hide. Well, this seemed like a beautiful practice. Journaling can be very cathartic, but those pages that were supposed to be private were no longer private at some point. Their personal thoughts became currency, the kind that could later be used to remind them who they were before they were saved from themselves. You didn't want to disappoint God by DMing the wrong person or answering family phone calls when you should have been protecting your spiritual climate. Isolation in these types of systems is so damaging. People begin to prune their world away slowly and then eagerly. You know, friends drift away, family waits for phone calls, and their universe kind of folds in until every voice they hear is less trusted than the voice coming from the pulpit or the yoga mat or whatever it is. They frame progress as surrender to a higher power and that surrender as growth. But that growth is really disappearing into someone else's idea of who God wants you to be. The money flowed in, believe me, tithes, offering, honor seeds, housing support for community, all taken in by the content that these girls were making. These bigger content creators make a lot of money, and Robert Shin was taking management fees to protect their brand. He said there were production costs for kingdom excellence. Their dependence didn't feel like dependency. It felt like belonging. And we all know that belonging is the purest human ache. Robert Shin would send text messages to the girls and other members of the church. He'd say things like, hey, how are you today? Just checking to make sure you're aligned. Remember to pray before responding to outside influences. Text messages like, hey, leadership wants to meet with you today about a conversation you had with your mom. And some people began to realize that their text messages were being monitored. Family members of church members were beginning to get a growing sense of unease because they were being cut off from their loved ones. The truth for the girls is that their talent and their beauty was being exploited. They were losing themselves slowly, beautifully, gracefully, and believing it was devotion. It was something much darker. There are tragedies that take lives, and then there are tragedies that take presence, where the person you love still breathes, still smiles, still moves through the world, yet somehow you cannot find them inside themselves anymore, as if devotion has turned them into an animated ghost whose eyes recognize you, but whose soul is answering to a different name. And the Wilking family could see these girls slipping away. On February 24th, 2022, they decided to intervene. They didn't rehearse lines or coordinate camera angles. They simply turned on Instagram Live and began to speak to the camera. Their faces did not carry anger. Anger would have been easier. The family members carried that soft-edged panic that only parents know, the kind born not from rebellion, but from absence, from the eerie sensation of losing your child to a world that speaks a language you don't understand. The Wilkings sat close together, their shoulders touching as if proximity to one another was an anchor for them, and their voices wavered. You could tell they were very emotional, and they made a plea to their daughters. Please come home. If not physically, then spiritually and emotionally and psychologically. Please come back to us. The family members spoke the words like cult, not as an attack, but as a lifeline, a desperate attempt to name what was happening to their daughters. They were being lost to a cult. And the Wilkings weren't performing. They were praying publicly. And the internet, cruel and ruthless, listened. Some people were empathetic, others were critical. And then 3 days later, Miranda appeared online, calm and composed, glowing in the soft, flattering light designed to smooth edges and erase doubt. She sat with the practiced gaze of someone who had learned to turn conviction into posture. She didn't cry, she didn't tremble, she didn't rage, she smiled. She came off as though she was transformed and certain. She said, "I am safe, I am happy, I am exactly where I am supposed to be." This is just terrifying to me as a parent of adult kids. You know, you do not have any type of control over your kids once they become adults. And there is so much dangerous influence out there. It's absolutely terrifying. The internet watched Miranda's video. Some whispered that she sounded brainwashed. Others typed, "She's just living her life. Leave her alone." But beneath every comment, every stitch and reaction, lived an undeniable truth. We had just watched two realities fracture on live stream. In Michigan, a family drowned in confusion and grief, reaching for someone they could no longer touch. In Los Angeles, a young woman floated on certainty like a lily on water, convinced that she had ascended. And here's the part no one likes to admit in cult stories, the part that makes our hearts feel guilty. Miranda did not look trapped. She looked content and she looked chosen. She looked like someone who believed her peace was proof of righteousness. We see this all the time in the cult stories that we talk about here on Dark Hearts. People in these cults are so damn sure that they are in the right place and they are doing the right thing until everything falls apart. And it's easy to be gaslit as someone that is concerned for someone like that because they look so confident. Miranda looked like these ties she was making were stronger than the ties with her own family. And that is truly a broken identity. The live stream was not a confrontation, it was a collision. Love meeting indoctrination. A soft disaster played out in the pixels on our screens. And the most painful part is that no one did scream. No one slammed doors. No one begged or cursed. It was heartbreak in its quietest form. A family losing one of their own. Behind the scenes, enough people had become incredibly concerned that they'd contacted the authorities, and the authorities were interested. What they found was worse than anyone could have imagined. People imagine raids as chaos. Doors kicked in, voices raised, adrenaline crashing like a wave against drywall. But when the government comes for you in the real world, like really comes for you, it's not a rumor or YouTube thread speculation. They come with coordinated decision and paperwork and probable cause. So when the sun had barely lifted above the San Gabriel foothills on July 23rd, 2025, and a sleepy Tujunga street yawned itself awake, believing it would host nothing more than dramatic views that day, a conclusion had been reached long before the engines ever turned a corner. There were no sirens, no shouting, no cinematic theatrics, just federal jackets. FBI, IRS criminal investigation, Department of Labor, U.S. Postal Inspection Service. Even the post office is involved here. The trucks appeared in a row, and neighbors peeked through blinds, expecting maybe a movie shoot or a reality show fiasco, because this is Los Angeles after all. But instead, neighbors watched the gloves slip on. Clipboards opened, evidence bags unfurled. They watched calm boots step towards a door that had been prayed behind, worshipped behind. And they watched those officers who don't do anything by accident.
Philip, calling right now. We are on McCrory Street here in Tujunga, and I want you to take a look. This is where that search warrant was executed earlier today. You can see that black fence still knocked over from the activity that happened here this morning. On this property is Shekinah Church. This church was the subject of a 2024 Netflix documentary that faced allegations of manipulation, abuse, and was even accused of being a cult.
Attention, anyone inside? 7744 McCrory Street. This is the Alani Police Department. Come to the front door with your hands up. We have a search warrant.
I heard two loud bangs, like bang, bang.
Oh,
I mean, it's very scary.
This place has always been curious to me.
Air 7 overhead this morning, moments after the FBI, El Monte Police, and several other agencies made their way onto this property, executing a search warrant for money laundering and sex trafficking. At least 7 people were detained, some spotted sitting along this brick fence. Investigators seen loading possible evidence into this white truck.
I'm just being a looky-loo right now. I'm trying to figure out what the heck went on.
The address of this property comes back to Shekinah Church, which was at the center of a Netflix documentary called Dancing for the Devil, the 7M TikTok cult. Former members accuse the church leader of running a cult-like business via his talent management company, as well as his church. Most neighbors are well aware of that documentary and want to get to the bottom of this.
Disconcerting to think if I had kids, that would be awful, because he basically felt like he took these kids and then kind of brainwashed them.
One of the people featured on that documentary now reacting to what happened here today.
We've been dreaming about this day. We've been praying about this day, for the day that the beginning of where justice will be served for all the victims, and to hopefully prevent people, young people, joining organizations like this.
Now, we've also learned the U.S. Postal Inspection Service was involved here at this search warrant that happened this morning. They tell us they can't comment much on the case right now because they want to protect the integrity of this investigation, but they are confirming that this is an active and ongoing case. Reporting into Hunga, Monica.
Inside the house, there was no crash of panic, no running or screaming, just the soft thud of drawers opening, keyboards unplugging, servers lifted gently like fragile relics. The agents bagged and sealed up hard drives. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. They weren't there to persuade anyone. They were there to collect evidence. The FBI had found evidence of potential coercion, interstate patterns, perhaps human trafficking adjacent activities that were whispered under layers of legal language. The IRS traced tithes and honor offerings, along with management fees, back to fraud charges. The Department of Labor was following up on charges of child labor and exploitation of minors. The postal inspectors, it's wild that they were there, were looking for evidence of mail fraud. There were no arrests that day, but the government gathered pieces of evidence. In high-control religious groups, raids don't need to end in cuffs to detonate. Inside communities like this, silence after government footsteps is not peace, it's panic. And of course, the people inside the cults don't look at the evidence as evidence, they look at it as persecution. Ex-members of this church watched every second of the news. They had hope mixed with dread and vindication tangled with grief. Many ex-members would later say they were praying that this meant the truth would surface. They knew what was going on inside that cult. That morning, Miranda saw the headline. She found out that her church had been raided. Federal vans pulled away as gently as they arrived, leaving behind a church community in shambles. Cults thrive in the shadows between certainty and secrecy, and a raid like this rips open the curtain, not to end the story, but to begin accountability. But I don't think anyone was prepared for just how bad it was. It's important to note that this case is ongoing. To date, no formal charges have been brought against Robert Shin. The warrants that were served during the raid include allegations of sex trafficking, money laundering, tax evasion, mail fraud, and COVID-19 related fraud. Robert Shin was detained during the raid, but he was not arrested when it was over. It's also important to note that there are charges of sexual abuse and sexual battery going on within the church. There is a civil case pending. It was supposed to go to trial in October of 2025. I believe it was supposed to start on the 27th, and it looks as though that's been pushed back. So I will stay on top of this and bring you an update. There have also been a lot of rumors online that a separate church house was raided in India. I have not been able to find any verifiable fact that there was a second raid in India. Now, if you go online, there's information all over. But I'm very careful about bringing you rumors, and it appears that it's rumor. Although I have a hard time thinking people just pulled that out of nowhere. Maybe something did happen in India and we just don't have a full picture of it yet. But basically, Robert Shin was running kind of a mafia type agency out of this church. People immediately began calling it the TikTok cult because there were people in the cult that were really big on TikTok and they were making a lot of content about the church. Now, as all of this went on, the two sisters from Michigan began to grow apart. Miranda has gotten married. She continues to make content, dancing content in particular, but it appears that Miranda is still involved in this cult. Melanie has left and has distanced herself from Robert Shin, and it doesn't look like Melanie is based in Los Angeles anymore, but she does make content as well. In 2024, Netflix released its documentary called Dancing for the Devil, and that put a microscope on Robert Shin. It appears that he is still living at the church in Los Angeles. He is under active federal investigation, meaning while he might not be under arrest, his activities and the organizations are subject to enforcement action. There's another set of sisters, the Lee sisters, Priscilla and Melanie, who are former members of this same church. They describe experiences of strict oversight, alleged sexual misconduct, and financial exploitation. Kaylee Gray and Kevin Davis are former dancers that have left the 7M organization. And Kylie Douglas is another former 7M dancer who is mentioned in the Netflix documentary and reports that she has left the agency. Sometimes they call it like a talent agency and not a church. It's really weird. I was introduced to the concept of a content house a couple of years ago. It's where a bunch of influencers and content creators get together, rent a house together, and all they do is make content. Well, Robert Shin took that idea and mixed it with a church that was actually a cult. I mean, only in 2025 could we have this story, right? So while this is a cult story, it's a true crime story as well. But I think more than that, it's a story about the dangers of social media and the influence that money and power have over young people. The drive to get famous online now is just, it scares me. And while this story does not yet have an ending, I think we're going to hear more about it in the future. So we'll call this part 1. I'll continue to follow the story and I'll bring you updates. My heart really goes out to family members that are missing people, that get sucked in by things like this. There's just so much to be exposed to now, and not all of that is good. I'm a big proponent of transparency and more information is better, but there are so many wolves in sheep's clothing that are capable, beyond capable, of making something look innocuous when it's actually very, very dangerous. Let's hope that the people involved in this have the awakening that they really need. And let's hope that if Robert Shin is guilty of what he's been accused of, he goes away for a long time. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. I sure appreciate you. This is my podcast. It's on Apple and Spotify. I post brand new episodes every Monday and Wednesday. I've got a new podcast coming very soon. We're just in the finishing production stages now. It's going to be called 15-Minute Mysteries with Stacy Lee. We're doing vanishings, stories with no ending, and medical mysteries. We're also going to be talking about a lot of historical mysteries in short form. It feels like content is going shorter and shorter, which is kind of a bummer because I like telling longer stories here on YouTube, but the watch time just doesn't justify it. One of these days, I'd like to have a playlist where we only do deep dives. I'm working on it. I hope you're well, and I want you to know I always appreciate it when you spend a little bit of your day with me. I know you have so many options of things to watch, so the fact that you watch my channel means the world to me. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other, and I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.